It's kind of green, but that's all we can do for that. All right, we will give it just 2 more minutes here. I think we've got 3 more minutes for people just to comment in. Thanks for those of you who are here 4 minutes early on the first day of class. We'll just give it a few more minutes for the last folks to get started, and then we'll get rolling. So feel free to just keep chatting, whatever. It'll just be another second.
The memory is a little asynchronous, so if some of us were looking for it,
yeah, I know. I hope that was part of that's the first test, right? You're able to find your in. Actually, I'll just do a quick check. See if they can hear us online. Find your in. Let's see. Quick check. See if they can hear us online. Oh, that is not good. Oh, I see what's happened. Okay. It's going to get really weird for a second. Not good. Okay. There we go. Sign into chat. Really? I got to sign in. Luckily, we built in those few extra minutes. This is yes. Okay, that's good. They can hear us. All right. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. I think we are just about ready to go. Hopefully, we won't be sort of vaguely green all semester, but I want to welcome you all to Introduction to Health Informatics, CS6440. This class, which is pretty full in its own right, is joined by about 275 students online in the OMS CS program. And we'll talk more about the sort of integration between the two classes. But there's a large online presence for this course, as well as the on-campus group here. So I'm extremely excited to have everybody, and wanted to begin really off the bat by taking you into, we'll get to the nuts and bolts of how this class works in just a sec, but I want to take you right into something that I think is a pretty amazing fact, a pretty amazing statistic that was released in 1999 by a group called the Institute of Medicine. The Institute of Medicine is considered the most prestigious medical group, consortium of researchers, leaders in the field. And in 1999, they came out with this statement saying that 90,000 patients die every year due to medical error. So this number sometimes for like effect, because you see this presented now and again, it's been 20 years. They say, well, it's like a 747 crashing every single day of the year in terms of the number of people who die, not due to disease, not due to illness, but due to medical error, making it at that time the 4th leading cause of death in the United States. And if you look at the causes, the reasons for these errors, they weren't like incredibly complex things like the guy didn't go to the best medical school and so they missed, you know, this important thing. It was not noticing lab results that came back. It was not realizing that the treatment dose was incorrect for that patient. It was errors in how the medicine was administered or failure to communicate or using the wrong equipment. These were mistakes. They weren't just medicine is hard. Medicine is hard, but it was more than that. It was errors that led to this. And in fact, because of this problem and because of the recognition, which predated 1999, that medicine is a very dangerous thing to practice, dangerous for patients, and challenging for physicians, there was the rise of this kind of notion of the alert. This is an electronic medical record system, a homegrown electronic medical record system, which was pervasive in the 80s and early 90s, where this was at a place called the Regan Street Institute, where they built their own EMR. They had coders around, they had doctors around, and they said, we're going to work on this. Nowadays, you'll hear names like Epic and Cerner and Athena. These are very, very large companies that cover, in some cases, 50% of the United States population may be touched by a system. But this was back in the day where they were just in a few places, maybe 4 or 5 places back in the 90s. And they developed these alerts. And these alerts basically were recognition that a doctor might be making a mistake. So what they say here is, hey, this medication you're about to prescribe may be dangerous if you prescribe it along with something else the patient's taking, in this case, warfarin. So, hey, maybe it's a good idea not to prescribe this drug. And what you'll learn, I mean, it's not pretty, but it's important. It's relevant. And there was a study done in 2002 looking at how well these alerts worked in preventing this kind of behavior, prescribing the wrong drugs. And this is what they found. They looked at 42,000 alerts from an electronic medical record system. They found that 11% of them were, that 11% of all orders, sorry, they looked at 42,000 orders, and that 11% produced a warning. And of those 11%, so of those alerts produced, 88% of the warnings about 2 drugs interacting were overridden, disregarded, ignored, thrown out, escape by the doctors. Okay? And of the allergy warnings, 69% overridden, thrown out, escape. It may seem kind of incredible, right? Like, there's a warning, the patient has an allergy to penicillin. I'm going to give you penicillin, and then don't do it, and I'm going to do it anyway. And you think, well, are the doctors trying, you know, not thinking in the patient's best interest? Well, most of the time they have a rationale. And that rationale may be something along the lines of, well, your mom said you were allergic to penicillin because you threw up when you were 6. That's not really an allergy. You need the antibiotic. You're not really allergic to it. In the case of drug interactions, it might say, you really need this Z-Pak, and I'll watch your other, you know, the other issue, and it's okay. We'll keep an eye on it. And the truth is you can get away with a certain number of disregarded alerts and everything's okay. But the informatics community, the medical informatics community, was concerned, of which you guys are now soon to become card-carrying members. After this course, we'll distribute your cards. They said, we are going to do something about this, and they released something called the 10 Commandments for Effective Clinical Decision Support, making evidence-based medicine a reality. Okay? And this was basically saying, what are the things we need to do to make alerts work better? So, you know, make everything move faster. Doctors are on the run, they're on the move. You can't interrupt them, you can't slow them down. You got to just shift things in a way that's smooth. Little things can make a big difference in usability design. All kinds of things around building better alerts so that maybe we can improve our performance. So the powers that be took this information, they thought about it, they put it into the systems, and about 10 years later, 2014, the same people went back and did another study to look at how we're doing with our drug interaction alerts and our other warnings that are coming through. And here's what they found. They looked at 18,000 alerts. The number that produced, or orders, the number that produced alerts was now up to 13%. And the override rate for interactions was 95%. It was 86 last time. And the allergy override rate is 91%, up from 69% last time. So a decade later, 10 commandments dropped from Mount Sinai later, it got worse. The problem in terms of alert overrides, disregard of the alerts, went up, got worse. So there's one really good alert, just to give you a context, right? So there's the order of, 13% of alerts produce warnings. Now, if you guys, interrupted me every 8 words with like, hey, wait, that doesn't sound right, I might get tired of it. I might stop listening. So maybe doctors are just overwhelmed by the volume of information. But this to me is like the perfect exemplary alert if we're going to deliver something, right? Like, has anyone in here been like driving along and like your fuel light went on and you said, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. It's probably nothing. It's fine, right? No, it's great. It's 10 times out of 10. If it pops up, you will run out of gas and you will stop. And, it pops up when you need it to. This is like the perfect alert. But the reality, as we've seen, is that in medicine, we've got a much less reliable sensor. And this is a larger study, 280,000 alerts. And they found it was 331 alerts to 1 prevented adverse event. 331 to 1. And then actually a very small number of them, though, prevented the most serious adverse events. So there was some like richness there. There were some like good warnings, right, in that bucket. You got to get to them to figure it out. So let me ask this. How many people here took or have taken machine language for trading as part of their computer science course? So like, I don't know, a dozen, give or take. And I would say online, probably a good number as well who've done it. Machine language for training, similar kind of idea in that you want to figure out the right thing to do. You've got a bunch of information, right? You're building sort of predictive models around what you should tackle. And I can tell you that, well, first off, how many people in that course then like went home, wrote an algorithm, and made like millions of dollars over winter break? Anybody? So no hands, no takers yet. So there's probably a lot of really amazing algorithm developers all over the world who lost billions of dollars over this past winter break with their algorithms. And then there's maybe some who bet against the market and they made some money. But the reality is the data in trading is awesome. You've got tons of data on every stock of every minute of every year for dozens and dozens of years. And still, it's hard to get it right. Like a lot of people still lose a lot of money. So medicine, on the one hand, is harder because the data aren't as good. We don't have the minute-to-minute and second-to-second precision of like, are we achieving our result or not, right? It's not going up or down. So machine language for trading, you've got great data compared to medicine. But what we do have in medicine is that everyone's working in the same direction, more or less. There's not people betting against it, people making it go up. Everyone wants the patient to get better. So when and sure, I or anybody here, there's some cynicism in healthcare. There's some money that is moved in ways that might make people be incentivized. But the core incentive is help patients get better, help prevent disease. All of the predictions and all of the alerts and all of those things are designed towards a common goal that the user, the doctor shares, the patient shares, the system shares. So we have some advantages, right? But we have our work cut out for us because unfortunately, 2013, medical error bumped up to the number 3 leading cause of death in the United States, estimated at 250,000 deaths per year due to medical error. So we have an opportunity in this course. I think we have an obligation to help where we can and use the capabilities and skills that you have and that you're developing to be able to tackle. Because if you shave even a tiny piece off of this, you can have a massive impact. We don't have to always be right. We don't have to fix every part of healthcare. But if you can begin to shave off and reduce and improve, you can make a really dramatic difference. So what is this course about? what is health informatics? Health informatics, and I made this definition up, but it sounds kind of right to me. Health informatics, and I didn't use Wikipedia, basically. There's two versions. I made it up or I used Wikipedia. No, health informatics is a field that integrates medical knowledge, information technology, and data analytics to enhance the delivery of care to patients and to improve our understanding of health and disease. So those big three pieces, there's medical knowledge, there's sort of like IT, and then there's data. Those are kind of the three pieces that go together in all different flavors. And most of the definitions that you'll see will kind of touch on those kinds of things. You may see a lot of other words or names for health informatics. You'll see clinical informatics, you'll see medical informatics, biomedical informatics, healthcare informatics, nursing informatics. They're all basically the same, but there are a couple ones you'll want to know and separate out. So bioinformatics, in the scale of the human being, of informatics in the human being, if you're inside the cell, you're probably in a bioinformatics world if you're doing genomics, proteomics, metabolomics. That's typically bioinformatics. And there's some great people on campus who I can point you to who do that work. We won't be covering a lot of that in here, but except as it relates to some of the clinical topics that we'll be talking about. Health informatics is kind of this broad thing in the middle. It includes stuff in the blood. It includes stuff in the population, but it's kind of this wide. And then there's public health informatics, and I should even say global health informatics, where there's a lot of aspects of the context of the healthcare delivery systems and things that include infrastructure and how things are delivered. There's a very broad aspect on the far side. Paula Braun from CDC has joined us today. Paula has been a great contributor to this course, both as a mentor and collaborator for a number of years at CDC. Brings a lot of the public health perspective, and that falls into health informatics. But you'll see some, I should say, kind of global health, bioinformatics, then there's sort of this wide piece in the middle. So just to be aware of. So what's the point of taking this course? What are the goals? And what do we hope to get out of it? So I would say the first thing is to be familiar, not like intimate with, but be familiar with health data. So that how it's generated, how it's used. This one thing will greatly increase your value out in the world, whether you are focused on machine learning, whether you're focused on algorithms or HCI or engineering or biomedical engineering management. This will sort of serve as an underpinning of value to a lot of different organizations. Number two is to be familiar with the technical challenges faced in healthcare. I just talked about one of them. We got too many alerts. That's like problem one of 7,343 that we can talk about. You'll be able to build interoperable health applications. So we're in a really good spot in 2019 compared to where we were in 1999 because we now have a way to create tools, alerts, analytics that work across all of these systems. I mean, you saw that DOS system that I showed from the Regenstrief Institute. Well, they could invent something amazing there, but they couldn't implement it at the hospital across the street. Just couldn't do it. There was no common language. We live in a very different time now, and thanks to a lot of the work, including Dr. Bronstein, who I'll mention in a second, and the FHIR community more broadly, there's interoperability capabilities that allow us to build things and deliver alerts in a more coherent way that can work across all these systems. And then finally, I want you to be aware that health is a really pretty awesome career path. You may have thought about it, and that's why you're in this class, or you may just have not been able to get into another class, and that's why you're in this class. There's so many different reasons, but truth be told, it's an amazing career path for computer scientists. I just got a text from the head of data science at Vertex Pharmaceuticals, which is like awesome, up in Boston. He is just like, send me anybody. I have so much demand. We're hiring and this is true of almost every health organization, that the intersection of data science and health is huge. But beyond that, it's understanding the challenges and understanding how it all comes together. So let me quickly pause there and do two things. One is I'm going to just check over on this side of the world to see if we're getting okay, they can hear us. So good. That was the check I wanted to do. And the second, was just to get a sense, how many in here are in CS? Okay. And what about in engineering? Is that biomedical engineering or other? Electrical? CSE, okay. Industrial engineering. What? And anybody in HCI? Okay. And for the people that are in CS, machine learning or analytics or what kind of stuff? Just throw it out. Okay. And is anyone in management or in a different area that I didn't mention?
Bioinformatics.
In bioinformatics. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. So we have in this course a range of topics. We cover things at different levels, recognizing there's a huge variety of skill sets here. But one of the first and best things to know about this course, and this I think is going to be a real interesting growth, is that this year, this is a combined online and on-campus course. And really mean combined. We've got 275 students in the online course with a huge variety of skill sets. Many of them work at the big companies I mentioned, Cerner or Epic, or work at companies like Microsoft or Google or Apple, or work in other parts of the health IT or IT industry and have amazing skill sets and capabilities. And what's going to be really fun is seeing how we can connect some of those together over the course of this semester so that we can really leverage the breadth of skills. Because I think you'll see that, I mean, for those of you in HEI, like looking at that alert thing I showed probably made you want to throw up. But, you know, there it is. And it hasn't changed that much since then. So these range of different skills and capabilities. The course has 4 main components. So one is lectures, and I'll tell you more about. So one set is in here and one set is online through the MOOC. We have hands-on activities. We have case studies, which is new this year. And we have the team project, Fire-based application development project. And your grade is driven by a mixture of these things. And a little bit later, I'll specify how the grade is actually pieced together from those elements. Running this course, there are a lot of TAs because there are a lot of people altogether. As I said, we're probably at about maybe 330 students. Our head TAs, T. Hope, Taylor Starton, Brent Forsgren, Ku Gupta, Ronnie Jones, Courtney Hart, and Sean Kaul will be on campus. Abhishek Koala, John Lam, Preetiman is here on campus and right here in the front. Alex McDonald, Mike Romano, and Eric Soto leads the HDAP Health Data Analytics platform that we'll talk about later and does a lot of support for this work. It takes a lot of people to run this class, and as you go through and we'll see the parts, you'll kind of get a sense of that. The main thing, if you remember only one thing, you stumble out of here and like, still like, how many people die a year and what do you say about the plane? Is this cs6440.godtech.edu. This has all the information. This has the syllabus. This has the schedule. This has what's due when. It has all the pieces. And I'll walk through these things, but this is the home. And in fact, because this is also an online hybrid course, there's a lot of assurance and checking that you've gotten all the information. So some of the assignments are actually like meta level. They're, you know, how many, you know, what assignments do you have? They're sort of designed to ensure that even people who are in Japan, which we got a great note from yesterday, are, you know, aware of what needs to be done when. So you guys are going to be part of that whole flow of information. Your calendar, this is part, so if you go to the calendar here, basically this says like, okay, week 1, you know, what do we need to do? We are in week 1 right now. So here's kind of the tasks, watching some lessons online. We'll talk about them. Start of course survey. There's a live lecture. I'm talking now, and then we'll be hearing from Daniel Wu, who's awesome about EMRs on Thursday. But also here's some stuff to do. Post on Piazza to say, hey, do this survey, take this case study, and we'll walk through all these, check your understanding practice. So this provides you with all the information of what's due when and what time it's all done. Also, you'll notice when you look at this calendar, the course is sort of front-loaded, like work-wise, in terms of assignments and didactics and all that. Like the first parts are like a lot of lectures, a lot of things getting you up to speed, and a lot of the activities and assignments go in. And then it starts moving more towards your team project and working on your team project. And then ultimately, you know, by the end really is the last several weeks are just focusing on building out your team project, preparing and finalizing that, and the presentations that go with it. So your calendar is a good friend. For those online, sorry, you probably didn't see that window, but we were just scrolling through the online version of this link. So what to tackle each week, what's due, but you'll also get a message each week, and we'll talk about that. So there's 4 kind of sets of tools. There's the communication tools, Piazza and Slack, lectures, there's assignment platforms, and there's project resources. So we'll just run through each of those real quick. Piazza is like the hub, like the central hub of all the activity. The TAs described it as the heartbeat of the class. All the up-to-date announcements of what's going on, what's due. It's the best way to communicate with your TAs. It's the best way to communicate questions. If you're taking doing an assignment or doing an exercise and you're like, this doesn't sound right, or like Dr. Bronstein in the video said something else, or Dr. Duke said something else, or I know because I work at place X, this is not. You can communicate that information via Piazza in private communications with the TAs. But Piazza is the hub for all of this and really to encourage collaboration amongst the students. And you can see, again, we've already got, there's already activities sort of flowing through Piazza, and it's actually a really good way. But we encourage you to check it with great frequency and make sure to set your calendar settings, your email settings so that you're getting updated from that. Oh, there was a screenshot of Piazza. So the start of week 1 announcements went on there today. A big point to note is that we've joined the Piazzas both online and on campus. If you go to campus and click on Piazza, it'll get you, to the right place. But you'll notice that the Piazza link, you should have all been invited. I think you have been. But if for whatever reason you're not there and you're wondering, it says CS6440 0001. That's the one for both the online and on-campus course. Piazza etiquette. I have been instructed in the ways of Piazza etiquette, but basically it's a forum. Everybody's polite, but also you can discuss solutions. Like if you have an answer and you want to ask someone like, hey, I think this is 63, but here's my question about it. You can do that privately, so you don't have to publicly post necessarily the answers. Though we do encourage posting discussions about the questions, about how you went about solving things and so forth. Also, later in the semester, we'll have team groups on Piazza so that when you get your project teams, you can communicate with them. And I don't know if this is a problem that occurs, but apparently the TAs will mark things as resolved when they're resolved. So even if you think that somebody answered with a great answer, I guess the resolved click is for the students who posted. So a little bit of that etiquette. Now Slack, I think people are largely familiar, but with this course, the main use of Slack is for office hours. So we have a OMS CS6440 Slack.com. There's office hours. Those will be posted. That's where you can go. You can ask questions. But for you guys on campus, I'm also hanging out at my office up in Tech Square. 3 p.m. Mondays and Fridays. Mondays, most burritos are $5.99. So if you want to make it all work, that is just fine. But I will be available for on-campus office hours. But you can also, of course, go through Piazza to ask questions. You can go through Slack to ask questions. If you're, in Tech Square and you want to hang out up in the Synergy building, and there's my contact information if you want to come through, because it's sort of, you got to buzz in. So we'll send all that out. But that's for the on-campus office hours. Okay, lectures. So there's 2 forms of lectures in this class. Form number 1 is from Dr. Mark Bronstein, and this is the Udacity MOOC. There's 12 lectures over a series, cover a range of topics. Dr. Bronstein is currently in Australia, both leising and drinking wine, but also setting up a course very similar to CS6440. You guys might find this hard to believe, but the Georgia Tech, the fire education at Georgia Tech is the biggest in the world. We teach more about interoperability in healthcare than anybody anywhere. But Australia is actually the home of fire, interestingly. So he's gone over there to build out some courses. But he's got a MOOC. This will all be on all the information will be on your regular schedule. But there's a lot of different core components. And what's great about having these fundamentals covered in the MOOC is that in class, we can then have lectures that we can use to talk about a variety of, so both myself and many experts in the field will come talk about healthcare challenges, case studies, new innovations, informatics solutions that have been applied. So we're going to complement some of the foundations in the MOOC with the information on campus, and all of those will be together. For those of you that are online, you have the option to watch this live, but it's also recorded. For those of you on campus, I strongly encourage you to please be here for the lectures, as the participation is both related to that, and that differs slightly between the two courses. So also, if you are online and you're in Atlanta and you want to come hang out, please come out and come down and join us 4:30 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So assignments. Assignments basically is like the homework part of the class, and there's 3 different flavors. So one is on Ingenious. Ingenious is a platform that lets you basically do like exercises with code. So you can, it says, okay, code a simple API to be able to query X, Y, or Z, give some examples. All of that is on Ingenious. All of this is also linked over from Canvas. You get 20 tries, I'm told, per exercise. So like it's not out to, you missed the semicolon. There's lots of opportunities to get it right, but it's helped you sort of learn about some things related to standards, related to interoperability, coding, and so forth. Case studies. So during this semester, we'll be reviewing 6 clinical scenarios that cover a range of medical topics, different data types, and different contexts. And the goal of these cases is, number one, just to expose you to like interesting medical scenarios, because just to kind of get a sense of data do not show up, certainly in healthcare, in data form. Right? They show up as a person going to see a doctor, a person having a healthcare encounter, a person communicating with a public health agency, and it becomes data, and we use it in all kinds of ways. But understanding where it starts is important. So looking at that, looking at how those encounters translate, but also how do we use data to tackle population health challenges. Each case will have a set of discussion questions, and that will be posted as a case study assignment. So when you see in Canvas, case study number 1, basically we'll be doing the case study a little later in just a few minutes. There'll be a couple readings to look at, and then there'll be some questions for discussion. So that will be part of those 6 case studies. You can leverage Piazza if you want to post more, if you read about it, if you're super jazzed about a topic and you want to keep discussing it. Piazza is the place to do it, but we'll also follow up here. Each week we'll have a new case. We'll start it Tuesday, and then on Thursday we'll do some follow-up as well. And then finally we have assessments. Basically, during the semester, there'll be 2 assessments to evaluate your sort of retention of the course material overall, ranging from the lectures, videos, reading, exercises, all of that. Assessment 1 will cover weeks 1 through 5. Assessment 2 will cover weeks 6 through 12. It's on Canvas. You have 60 minutes to take it. It's open book. It's open note. It's open lecture. It can be, it's open. But it should be done alone. This is not one where we all say, what's the answer to number 12? And it's randomized also, so everyone will have a different one they have. You do get 2 attempts, so that if there's errors that are made, you can learn about them. When you do a second attempt, it will re-randomize and the questions will change. And so it's not 100%, but that's designed to be, rather than doing a quiz every week, we're kind of putting these assessments together so you can get a sense again. And you can see that it kind of ends in week 12 for the core assessment component. And then by that point, we've moved more into the project phase. So the calendar knows all, right? I mean, there's all these different things. There's the different assessments and Ingenious and all that. It's all on the calendar. So everything I've said still goes back to the Palantir that is the calendar. Okay, then finally, team projects. So the other big part and the cornerstone of this course really is tackling a real-world health challenge proposed by an expert in the field and led by an expert in the field. And today, as Paula well knows, we've sent out invitations to many, many, many leaders across the country, in the world, in industry, in healthcare, in government and regulatory. Though the government, they haven't answered well today. I don't know why. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, as soon as the shutdown ends, they'll pick up and start answering their emails. But basically, we have a huge range of mentors on all different topics who have very enthusiastically volunteered their time, not just 1 semester or 2 semesters, but now some 3, 4, and so forth, because they love working with students in this course to build out applications. These are people who understand the challenges, but they don't have the technical teams to help them solve them. And so bringing these groups together has been very, very successful. Your team can have 4 to 6 members. We encourage a multidisciplinary, so only a couple HCI folks, so they're going to go quick. But no, you want people who have back end and front end and HCI and management, all these different skills and engineering and understanding of how to look at questions. And so a mix of teams, and the team basically will develop, I'll talk about team formation in a second, but basically you'll develop an interoperable application using FHIR to address the healthcare challenge. Projects are open source and deployed at the end of the semester on the Georgia Tech Health Data Analytics platform, which I will also describe momentarily. But a word about project team formation. You'll have the opportunity to form your own teams. So we don't assign teams here. Everybody here, I'm sure, is extremely nice and great to work with, but I can't judge that. So you'll form your own teams. They can be hybrid. You can do on campus combined with online, or you can just work on campus, either way. But the main thing is basically the way to get that rolling is through Piazza. There's a post number 5 on Piazza, which is search for teammates. Somehow they made this like special functionality. Someone will have to tell me how you do this, but where you can basically say like, I'm a student or I have a group and we're looking for people, and you describe who you are and your kind of background and skills, and these things start coming together. If you're in class and you just want to kind of chit chat and meet with everybody as well, that is fine as well. You don't have to go through this, but this is the core way that you can be sure that you're floated out there and that you're in the pool looking for groups. And so we've got a number of weeks, I think about 3 or 4 weeks to get the teams formed. So we know it takes a little bit of time to get those teams worked out. All right, the Health Data Analytics Platform, also known as HDAP, is designed to support students and researchers in developing health applications here at Georgia Tech. HDAP provides a few things that are really key. One is data. So most of you, I don't know, working with health data, it's kind of personal, right? You said, we're going to do this awesome study on looking at risk of sexually transmitted disease in teenagers who, you can't really just get those data from the hospital. There's all kinds of privacy rules around it. So we provide synthetic data sets. Sometimes mentors will bring data sets, but in other cases, you'll want to leverage the sort of data sets that we have. We have FHIR servers. You'll learn about that. We have a Smart on FHIR infrastructure. You'll learn about that, but it's sort of the way that FHIR applications can be set up and authenticated. And we have a deployment platform for doing it. And the one that you'll probably have the most sort of like, questions about probably will be the deployment platform. And the reason that exists is like, this is the state of affairs. When I first started working with this course, like all this amazing stuff that had been built over all these years, and not just in this course, but like every graduate course ever, right, is like someone built something awesome and it's in a box under somebody's desk and no one will ever be able to see it or run it or use it. And it's too bad because there's really great stuff that's made. And so what we wanted to do was not only have the code and not only have the documentation, but actually have running versions of these applications that could be used both by your mentors who are giving their time to be able to work with you and provide some guidance, but also future students who might say, well, that'd be pretty cool. I'd like to kind of take that and maybe riff on it or learn from it and so forth. So this is more like a development platform. It's got Jenkins. It's all containerized using using Docker, and now I think it's like Kubernetes. But basically, you'll get a whole lecture about how HDAP works. But like it's all kinds of production pipeline-y stuff that makes it run. But at the end of the day, we have an app, hdap.godtech.edu. And it has an app gallery. It's got running apps. It's got things that students have long since retired or now off working for Facebook, but their apps still live here where we can run them and check them out. So the ability to put things up on HDAP has a lot of value. So you'll be learning some about that, and some grudgingly and some enthusiastically. In fact, many people actually, in a complete surprise to me, said, we love learning some of the enterprise development or deployment mechanisms because that would come in handy when I have to use Jenkins and whatever in my future job. So some cool apps on the pipeline. Then the final, we don't have a final exam, so cool. We've got a couple of assessments. Obviously we've got a lot of stuff. You guys are feeling it, but the final presentation is a video that you make of the application. Here's how it's running. Here's the demo. You've got documentation of it. And for the on-campus students, you also present live to your fellow students and to your mentors in kind of a little celebration. We got some food, we get some snacks, and and it's in a bigger auditorium, and we have a presentation of what's been developed. And for those who are online, if you're interested, let us know if you want to be part of that. But that's demo day, and that is sort of during final exam week. That's what's going on here. So, oh gosh, okay, last thing is grades. It's all on the syllabus, but just briefly so that you know, it's broken down. Class participation components come from case studies and from assessments, and these check your understanding and surveys are more about the course logistics and how that works. Activities are these ingenious assignments of coding and standards. Then the team project is about another third of your grade, and that's sort of around the performance, both individually and also the outcome and work of that team. And there's many checkpoints along that. All of that will be spelled out in greater detail that you can look at. We have a pretty standard grading scheme. I think this is just kind of regular grading. I noticed my daughter, who's in 6th grade, it says 90 to 110 is an A. So I don't know if there's like curve grade inflation in elementary school or middle school, but I don't think we have that here. So it's just regular grades. If you don't turn it in, an assignment or project, it's a 0. There may be something called stretch assignments later if needed. There's not a curve, but if there's a need or value to have certain sort of extra assignments at the end, that sometimes in some semesters has been done, but not every semester. And because it's such a big class and there's so many TAs and there's all these different pieces, there's just really no late stuff. It's just too complicated. It's got to get in the workflow. So if you're due to get something in and you can't get it in via Canvas or whatever, you can send a Piazza post and attach it as a like, here's my thing. I tried to get it, it didn't work. But otherwise, there's not really a mechanism to accept late work in the class. Academic honesty. So the main thing is we actually encourage a lot of collaboration. These are challenging questions that don't always have simple answers. And you can discuss them in person, you can discuss them in Piazza, you can discuss all these things, but obviously your own work should be your own work, and all the honor code things that you expect with your other classes or that you have with the other classes are the same here. So this is a puppy, just because a lot of stuff, a lot of heavy stuff that we just went through. And so I wanted to take a little moment break here to answer any questions here or online. And this, by the way, so this is also being streamed for those folks online who wanted to chime in. And there's a little chat going on there. So that's where those questions are. But first, here in class, does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
My question was about the group project. So you said you're going to be looking for mentors for us. Are we going to be interacting with them in person, or is that going to be online?
So the on-campus, generally the mentors come in person and present. But there's so many cool projects that are presented that we have opened the possibility that if somebody sees if a team sees a project that's been proposed by a remote mentor and they really, really want to do it, we can make that work and facilitate. Most of the interactions are virtual. So even if a presenter comes in person and presents their challenge, most of the interaction is virtual in the end.
As a follow-up to that, are all the mentors in already, or if we wanted to go solicit a mentor ourselves and a project that we had?
You definitely can. In fact, if you go to tinyurl.com/CS6440, it'll bring you to the mentor submission, the proposal submission page. We are always looking for new mentors, and so no, it actually doesn't finalize until beginning of February 1st, essentially. So yes, you've got time.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
What's the required coding language?
Good question. So basically, with HDAP, we can so two things to know. It's the kind of everything but. So like Python or Java or Node or PHP or whatever is fine. .NET is a little sketchy. It's not our preference. Avoid it if possible. And this semester, we're really trying to avoid native apps like native iOS or native Android apps, just because it makes it much harder to build and deploy on the platform. But in terms of back-end, front-end, again, Node, Python, Java, anything you like there. Front-end can be, JavaScript, HTML, React, Angular, doesn't matter. Does that answer your question more or less? I will say that most of our resources, our database resources that we provide on HTAP are using Postgres as the database. You are able to spin up as a container your own database if you'd like, but you don't need to. But if you want to, you can spin up a different SQL, or a different engine or a big data stack or whatever. I mean, anything you put in a container, you basically can spin up. So, yeah. Other questions? All right. So you guys can read better than I can, even from the distance and even in purple probably. But let's see. So thank you for mentioning online. The oceanographer, okay, biomedical engineer, computer system, HTAP URL. Yes, I will type that in here, htap.gatech.edu. I think that's kind of it. Maybe. Let's see, for the individual and genius assignments, okay, yes. So thank you. Tia already answered that, so saving that time. Thank you very much. There's a delay of like about 6 seconds or so, so anything I say, it's hard to have the direct live, but I think more or less they're on track there. All right. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. All right. So we are going to dive into our first clinical case. First clinical case of the day, of the semester. And this is the story. It is June 12th, 2002. Patient JM, privacy reasons and all that. Patient JM is a 62-year-old male who comes into the St. Cecilia's emergency room complaining of chest pain and shortness of breath. All right, so chest pain, and they can't breathe well, shortness of breath. The patient says that he awoke with the pain, which he described as an elephant standing on my chest, at about 6 a.m. after an unremarkable evening, including dinner at the Olive Garden and an episode of Law and Order. It's 2002. I checked what was big on TV at that time. I almost put Game of Thrones or whatever, and no. Anyway, Law and Order, that's where it was at. But the point is, an unremarkable evening, woke up, elephant standing on the chest. This patient, JM, has a past medical history of hypertension, that means high blood pressure, of hyperlipidemia, increased cholesterol, and of knee arthritis. The patient's medications are lisinopril, which is used for blood pressure, atorvastatin, which is used for cholesterol, rofecoxib, which is an anti-inflammatory, and a multivitamin, just because it's good. Patient denies any allergies. Social history, no smoking, rarely uses alcohol, a couple times a week, works as an architect, and has a family history of colon cancer. The physical exam, and I don't expect you to understand all of this or even all the stuff that came before, but this is the way the physical exam might be described, is as a diaphoretic. That means a sweaty white male in mild distress. They're not comfortable. Temperature 98.4, blood pressure 94/60, heart rate of 106, respiratory rate of 24, pulse ox, that means the oxygen saturation, how oxygenated they are, of 91%. Their lungs have rows. That means what sounds like crackles, like Rice Krispie sound on both sides. And their heart has normal sounds. S1, S2 is the lub-dub, bum, 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 bum. Also has an extra sound called S4, which you can get with high blood pressure sometimes. But overall, quiet heart sounds. Abdomen stands for soft, non-tender, non-distended. Means you can mush on it. It's okay. Doesn't bother me. Normal bowel sounds. Listen, sounds okay. Extremities, arms, legs are cool. The pulses are 1+. If you were in medical training, 2+ is regular, 1+ is a little bit low. It means their pulse is not that strong. And they have 1+ edema. Edema means swelling of the extremities, in this case, swelling of the legs. So they've got a little bit of swelling down in there. All right? So the question is, what's going on with this patient? Now, this is not a class where we're learning medical diagnostics, so I hope at the end you guys will be interested and excited in it. Our goal is not to do that. Our goal is to understand, though, how something like this, a everyday thing that one might see, and is happening right now as we speak in thousands of emergency rooms around the country, what does it mean? And we have the liberty in this class to go inside and look at exactly what's happening physiologically. So this is what's going on in this patient, JM, and it has to do with their cardiovascular system. So the cardiovascular system, you see the blue, you see the red, maybe it brings back some memory of some class or something a bit more, but here's the basic gist. The heart pumps blood, the good blood, the oxygen-filled blood, through to your body, to your muscles, and that's the red blood. That's the stuff that's filled with oxygen, and it helps you can move. You need oxygenation to all of your muscles in order to keep the energy moving. But once you've sent it out there, your body uses it up, and the blood that gets sent back through the veins, so out by the arteries into the veins, is the blue stuff in this case. It's not rich, it's blue, and it goes back into the heart and gets sent to the lungs, where the lungs go, and they fill it back up, and it becomes red again. So this classic picture is just there's a flow, oxygen out to the body, back into the heart, to the lungs, and back. But what makes this all happen is the heart, right? So this is a picture, a cross-section of the heart, as if it's been cut right down through the middle. And on the left side, you can see here is where it's pumping out into the body. And the right side is where it gets it back and it pumps it out into the lungs. So the heart's job is just pump, relax, pump, relax, pump, relax. We're all sitting here, and every one of us, boom, 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 boom. And when you look at it, it's kind of crazy. Like, it's kind of freaky. You're like, oh my God, it might just stop. Like, it's just going. But it just does this. It does it millions of times in your lifetime. Bump, 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 bump. And the sounds that you hear have to do with these valves opening and closing. But the key part is that in this particular patient, there's a question, a challenge that came up. So how does the heart muscle, and this is some thick muscle, like this is like a very strong looking heart. How does it do that, right? How does it get its own power? And the way that it does it is that when it's sending blood out to the rest of your body, it siphons a little bit of that blood off. It siphons that blood off for itself, and it goes down something called the coronary arteries. Coronary arteries feed into the heart. So the heart is basically pumping blood to itself. In this patient, in JM, we have a problem right here in the left anterior descending coronary artery. Okay, that's called the LAD. And what JM has, unfortunately, is a development of what's called a myocardial infarction, also commonly known as a heart attack. In this particular situation, the arteries that we described, those nice arteries that are feeding the heart itself, are having a problem with blockage, or more specifically, with not enough blood being able to get to what it needs to be going. So one common situation, if you hear something about somebody was just doing great, walking around, and then just dropped from a heart attack, one common case is that they had a plaque from cholesterol, from all these things, and it blocked the heart, and it couldn't feed the heart, and the heart muscle dies. In some cases, not as much now, the muscles, the arteries can spasm. If you use cocaine, I'm assuming none of you do, but if you do, those arteries can spasm, and you can get heart attacks from that. A more common thing is that somebody can build up plaque. There's nothing that's down here, nothing dramatic, but they're just getting an increased workload, right? So somebody's out there shoveling snow. It's a classic story, right? They're out there, they're shoveling snow, and even though they never had a problem, they didn't have some big event, it was just too much demand on the heart, too much beating, and what that means is they couldn't get enough blood through there. So these are different ways that someone can have a heart attack, and this is how we'll find out, but our patient has had a heart attack, so suspects the doctors in the emergency room. They consider other things, they're going to think about other things, but if somebody comes in with that complaint, I woke up this morning, half an hour ago, felt like an elephant standing on my chest, I still have chest pain, I'm sweating, I can't breathe, you get to go front in line. You could have a guy who just broke his arm and he's got his hip or whatever in two places, but if you come in with that story, you will go to the front of the line because they have to move very quickly, and in this case, they do. They get an EKG, they get an x-ray, they get blood tests, they give him some aspirin, still along. So what is an EKG? Well, an EKG is basically a measurement of the electrical activity of the heart. It's like a little drawing, but when you get good at it, you can actually tell how the heart muscles are moving. And in fact, it's hard to tell up here, but the computers have gotten pretty good, actually for like 20 years, the computers can read this and say, oh, it looks like this guy's having a heart attack. It knows how to look at the patterns. They're pretty straightforward. They're rule-based. So when you think about the data that are being generated by an EKG, one is an image. This is like literally an image, the tracing. Two is the raw data underneath. Three is the interpretation that these computers are making that put the information out, and the embedded algorithms that go with them. So there's data that are now being generated. JM is now starting to churn data into the health system in addition to his initial set of complaints. He also got a chest x-ray. So a chest x-ray in this case, now this is what his chest x-ray looked like. A normal chest x-ray, I know it looks like about the same, and this is something that's sort of maddening, but like this is like puffy. See how that's like fluffy? I don't know what word, cotton balls kind of thing. This is kind of like not. So when you see these things for a while, you get to know like, that doesn't look good. That looks like he's got a lot of fluid in there. And so in this case, the important part is that the chest x-ray is a new piece of data. It's an image that could be scanned by a deep learning network, right? A convolutional neural network would love these things. These are images. These also are reports that are dictated by a physician, subject for natural language processing, generated in some cases by natural language processing, but also reviewed and analyzed. So these are free text data. They're images that are being generated. There's also lab values. When the heart muscle breaks, it releases certain types of chemicals or enzymes. Creatine kinase and troponin are really well known. These are the normal levels, less than 200, less than 1. These guys are off the charts. 2,000, 120. This person, without question, has a myocardial infarction. It meets all the criteria that a doctor would need to know. It's also generated data that can help us understand more broadly. So indeed, the patient's diagnosed with an MI. They are rushed in for an angioplasty. An angioplasty, in this case, so here's the area that we care about, and it's a little bit hard to see, but like the blood seems not to be there. There's like this little part there where the blood is very thin. And you can see on the slides later how that looks. But essentially, there's a situation where there's been a plaque that's been building up here. And with an angioplasty, they take a little needle and a long wire, like a long wire, and they put it into your leg, into your femur, into your femoral artery. Numb it up, but basically put it in there, and they thread it all the way into your heart. And they put a little catheter right where the blockage is, and they just blow it up like a balloon, right? Like the cardiologist is like, phew. No, they have like things. But anyway, they blow it up, and it pops open, and then they put a stent in it, a metal little mesh, and that keeps the blood flowing. So that's exactly what happened in this case. They go through, they open it up, and then later the blood is now flowing properly. So this is what would be a textbook case of a myocardial infarction, presenting in a classic way, having classic data, and being treated in a way that's sort of the standard of care, and in this case had a positive outcome. He will make it, his heart will recover over time, and actually, depending on the speed of it, will be able to be just fine, but he'll probably be on some medicines and other things after that. So the patient is doing great. So clinical story, data generated, all of that well and good. But the plot thickens, in fact, because in 2004, a company called Merck withdrew the medication rofecoxib, which JM was taking for his arthritis. It was withdrawn from the market due to increased risk of myocardial infarction. There was concern sufficient that the FDA said, well, together with the company, this medication needs to come off the market for this. And there have been suspicions for a while. Since 2001, there have been some studies on it, and there were some larger studies where they looked at this question of, does this medicine, rofecoxib, cause myocardial infarction, right? That was the question. And they had to try to figure out a way to answer that to know what to do with this drug. What they said was, our findings indicate that rofecoxib, Vioxx, should have been withdrawn several years earlier. The reasons why the manufacturer and drug licensing authorities, i.e. the FDA, didn't continually monitor and summarize the evidence need to be clarified. So they're basically saying, we looked at all the data, and yeah, it does cause myocardial infarction, and we feel that it should have been recognized sooner. The question is, how could researchers find this? Now, here's patient JM. We'll come back to this, but here's patient JM. Like, he went to St. Cecilia's emergency room and he had a whole thing and he produced all that data. But like, how do you get, where does it go? How do you get it? Like, how, what, like, that's the question. And certainly when this happened, it was not easy to do. So how could you figure out if this drug, rofecoxib, Vioxx, caused myocardial infarction? Well, one thing you could do is run a large randomized clinical trial. Where you would do is each person who comes in who has knee pain or needs anti-inflammatory, you could give one of them Vioxx and one of them placebo, and one of them Vioxx and one placebo randomly, and then you wait 20 years and you see you had a myocardial infarction, and then you do the math and you add it up, see how it goes. You can probably imagine, take a couple decades, probably cost about $500 million. It's really not on the list of options. You just can't do it. It's also potentially unethical at some point along the way to do that. But initially, RCT, the randomized controlled trial, is the gold standard of evidence in healthcare. But you can't do it for everything. There's just too many questions, right? There's just too many questions in order to do it. So another option is to analyze existing clinical trials in which Vioxx was studied. And this is what these folks did. They basically said, we're going to look at the 18 trials where people looked at Vioxx for like knee pain, for elbow pain, for back pain, and we're going to see what we found. By the way, why was Vioxx put out? Well, it turns out that Vioxx reduces the risk of bleeding from the stomach. And that is a big problem when you take medicines like Advil or Aleve. They can cause problems with the stomach. So it wasn't just invented just because. It's because it reduced the risk of bleeding, and bleeding can cause all kinds of problems. But they did all these studies, and they've pulled them all together. And they saw there were 21,000 patients, and of them, 64 had heart attacks. 52 with this one group and 12 in the control group, okay? So, if you do simple math, it looks like, well, maybe that sounds like that could be a more problem, but you have to look a little bit deeper, and they did. They broke this all down. They looked at each study, and then they grouped them all together. And here's a couple things to note. One is when you look at a bunch of questions that were asked in a bunch of different ways, the answers are kind of all over the place. This side says, like, we think that Vioxx maybe was bad. This side says maybe Vioxx was good. And then everything that crosses the midline says, like, we don't really know. That's what's called a relative risk of 1. So if someone says, oh, your relative risk of 1, that means it doesn't matter. You can do this, you can do that, same difference. But we added them all together, and they did their fancy math. They got a relative risk of 2.2, and that sort of confidence interval, like a range. So they said, yeah, we think that looking at this, Vioxx may well cause it, but the sample size is small, but we think so. Another way to do it, and something we'll be focusing on a lot in principle in this semester for any question, not just, we're doing a clinical scenario here, but for any kind of question, is looking at real world data that's generated in a hospital, in a healthcare setting, in an environment, and look and say, how can we answer questions using those data? So these guys from Kaiser Permanente, which is probably like maybe the biggest, health system all over the place in many, many states, 2 years of data, right? Just 2 years, 3 years of data. They got 1.4 million patients, right? It's a lot better than 24,000. Those are people who took any kind of anti-inflammatory medication. They got 8,000 heart attacks or events like that. And they got the relative risk about 1.6 for Vioxx, with also a bit of a little bit of a narrower range, closer to 1. They said high dose Vioxx is bad. They also concurred. So another way that you could do this is you could say, well, here at Kaiser Permanente, this is what we found. So what I'd like you to think about is, how did they find these people, right? Like, you just have an idea. And this is like, now that you're in health informatics, this people will say, like, okay, I've got a health question. Like, do flu vaccines cause autism? Right? Like, that's a question. Whether it's, Carthio asked it or like somebody asked it, like, that's a question. You're driving home and it's very reasonable. You're going to hear something, read something. This causes that. Or if you do this, you're less likely to develop, a bad side effect. The question is, how do you take that English question, that like human question, and turn it into an analysis? And that is the work of health informatics. And that is why you get very valued in the world, is when you can translate those kinds of things. You're not waiting for someone to say, here's a bunch of data, and this means A, and this means B, and you guys figure out how to run the, build a model and do parameter tuning. Instead, you're able to say, I understand what A is about, and I understand what B is about, and I think maybe B could be, you have understanding of the context. So what these guys did is they said, we found individuals who had at least one prescription for one of these medications. How did they find it? We don't know. This is all they said. Presumably Kaiser Permanente, maybe they did like a text search in people's charts. They don't really specify. We identified acute myocardial infarction using what's called the International Classification or ICD-9 coding system. We'll learn more about coding systems, but basically there's a number that means heart attack, myocardial infarction, and a doctor, in order to get paid, checked the box. This patient had an MI, I checked the box, and that's how they were able to find those patients. It looks like they also looked at some other laboratory results. So they pulled lab results from Kaiser Permanente. So you can imagine these researchers are saying, what are we looking for? People who took a drug. What outcome care about? People had heart attacks. And how are we going to find it? And in Kaiser Permanente, they went to their friends, they pulled out the computer, and they were able to query those things. The question is, again, how do we find somebody like JM, who's not at Kaiser Permanente, who's not part of that environment, but would be a really valuable case, a perfect case for this? A patient who had a few problems, was on this drug, who did develop myocardial infarction. How do you find them? And so our discussion questions, a case that will be on the case study for this week, is around this. We've kind of covered the things here. There's a couple little articles, but basically just simply the questions are, what types of data healthcare data would these researchers want in order to determine the risk of myocardial infarction? And how could they go about getting those data for patient JM, right? Maybe you call St. Cecilia's and say, we're doing a study. Can you send us patients? Maybe. I mean, just to think through it. And we'll talk more on Thursday about some ideas that people have on this. So you can kind of chew on it a little bit and think about it. And what are those barriers? And then what types of technology or applications could be used to help inform providers about the emerging risks of the medications they prescribe? So throwing down the gauntlet, here's a case, here's some data, here's some questions about it. Over the next few days, you've got lectures online, you've got information on Canvas, but then on Thursday, we'll be having the guy who leads the emergency room at Grady. So this guy has seen some stuff. He probably has had to be like, you broke your leg in 3 places, you're having an MI, you just got shot in the head, and we've got to decide. Like he is someone who has confronted multiple difficult decisions about that. Daniel Wu is going to be talking about the systems and the way that works. So he'll be here on Thursday. If you have any questions, feel free, and please post them up on Piazza. Take a look, and thank you all very much, and have a good afternoon. Any last questions online? Thank you, Stephen Smith.
I just want to say sorry for coming in late. I'm trying to remind you.
It's all good, man.
I just didn't want to.
No, you're fine. It's fine in the place. It's tough enough. It's fine. It's all good. Yeah.
So in case if it happens to miss a lecture, is it a possibility of doing it?
Yes. Yeah. We'll have a little work. Yes. If you're not able to make it, we'll be able to. All right. Thank you all for listening in. We're going to turn off the Google Hangout now.